Now, in the process of doing our raised bed garden, it turns out that there are probably, I'm just going to call them some basic skills that I know all real woodworkers know these things. So, it'll just be at best a review to them, and in some cases they may just want to skip this. But it's kind of important stuff, probably more important than you might think. Now, in my case, I ended up using this screw the most. It's 1.25, the 6x1.25 deck screw, and probably the main reason I did is because I happen to have a bucket full of them. I ordered a whole bunch of them for another reason, but it's a deck screw, and the thing about deck screws is really you don't have to drill pilot holes with them theoretically. But what I want to show you here on this raised bed garden stuff is that may not be as true as you think here. Let's talk about the power driver. Now yours, I don't know what kind you use. This is a DeWalt. It's an older type DeWalt, but the nice thing about it, of course, it's got a forward and a backwards and etc. But it has this torque setting up here on top. And what you do with this basically allows you to adjust how much torque you use when you put a screw in. So if I take that little screw and I say, okay, let's put this screw in here. I'm going to set it down to its lowest setting. Let's put it right here. Now you see what's happening here. When you hear that noise, is it's not actually going in anymore. It's saying I've reached the #1 torque setting. So let's take it up a little bit, maybe to 5 or so. And then it goes all the way in, and when it's all the way in, it starts that clicking thing, which is exactly what you want to have happen. You adjust your torque settings so that it takes the screw all the way in, and then it stops. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go too far. So I'm going to take it all the way up just to demonstrate this. I'll do a different hole just because. Do you see what happens here? It splits the wood. In this case, it does two things. It splits the wood, and this screw, even though I'm still screwing it, you haven't heard it click yet, it's not going in any further, but it's turning, which means, of course, it's stripped. Now, the problem here is that you just really turned that one piece of wood into two pieces of wood, and the screw went right down in between them, even though it's a deck screw, and you're not supposed to have to drill a pilot hole for it. Now this is bad, because if you had a whole deck made of joints that were put together, or if you had a whole raised bed garden where many of your joints were like that, how do you suppose that would hold up in the wind? And I'm going to guess you over a period of time, it's going to deteriorate very quickly. Therefore, we don't want that to happen. Now, the way you avoid this situation, in addition to making sure your torque setting is in the right spot, and you'll just have to experiment with that when you're doing it. You want the screw to go all the way in, seat, and then stop. That's it. Not apply any more torque to it. And you'll just have to mess with it to figure out what that should be. And it's generally not an exact, it might be 7, but probably 6 or 5 would be okay too. So in other words, it doesn't have to be precise. It just has to be close. But that's what you're going to have to do, is figure out what that setting is. Now the other thing though is that really, if you want a joint to be strong and you're using screws as fasteners, what you really want to do is come up with a pilot hole that is basically the inside diameter of the screw. you want this drill bit to be the inside diameter. You see these threads here? It's got an outside diameter and it has an inside diameter. And technically your perfect pilot hole would be constructed of a drill that is the inside diameter of this particular screw, the screw that you're using, whatever it is. Now in my case, as you can see, I actually have a countersink on this one. It does two things for me. It drills a pilot hole and it countersinks the pilot hole so that the head on the screw will go below the surface of the wood. So let's say I was going to attach this piece to this piece. Now before I do that, let me do this. These deck screws are very sharp and they're really made so that you don't have to drill a pilot hole. That's why that's the purpose of them. They're nice and sharp, they go in well, they have an incline on them that takes them in. And when you have two soft pieces of wood, so for example this is redwood and that's redwood, and I want to mount these two together, works like a champ. No pilot hole, just went right in, no split. These are soft pieces of wood. You try that same thing with a hard piece of wood, and you might find you get different results. And we'll see here, but I'll bet you I do with this. I don't know. This is, first off, it's a little thinner, and secondly, it's some kind of hardwood. You know, pallets, many of them are made of oak. They are often hardwood. You see what happens here? No pilot hole. Okay? No pilot hole. We got a split in the wood, which is not acceptable. I mean, this is almost useless as a fastener. But if I do the same thing, only I come over here and get my pilot hole bit, and before we put the screw in, I drill a hole. Get a nice flush mounted screw. You notice the same torque setting, everything's the same, except there's no split this time. That is a much stronger joint, and you see it's gone in all the way. If it hadn't gone in all the way, I'd take my torque setting up just a little bit. So now there's one other thing I'll point out to you. I didn't do any of this on this particular raised bed garden project. However, there are projects where you definitely do want to do this, and it involves one other drill. I mean, if you were making, say, a piece of furniture out of cherry or walnut or a hard wood, and you're trying to screw things together, you would drill a pilot hole. But you would also drill what's called a clearance hole. And a clearance hole is theoretically just bigger than this outside diameter. Now this particular bit's probably a little bit bigger than you need, but it would certainly work in this particular case. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this clearance bit and we're going to use it not on the hole, not on the entire hole, just on the piece that's going to be attached, like that. Now you can see what happens with a clearance hole Because the screw you don't even have to screw it into a clearance hole. I mean, it just drops right in, and that is correct. That's what you want it to be. Then we come in here and we go to our pilot hole. If I can line it up. And this is kind of the, let's just call it the optimum joint. That's really the right way to do it in most of your woodworking situations. But in our raised bed garden, we have so many holes to drill that, you know, we're just not going to mess with it. But that gives you the best joint, and it's not only is it the strongest, because you don't have this, and you don't have wood that's been forced to split out. Even if it doesn't split, it'll still be stronger. But it's also easier to put in, a whole lot easier to put in when you drill these pilot holes. Otherwise, it has to fight its way through all by itself. So that's the notion behind pilot holes, clearance holes. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you here on this particular project is that I did end up using different screws in different places, and the thing that decides or determines whether you're going to use, which screw you're going to use, of course, is kind of what you're screwing to whatever's there. So for example, if you needed to go all the way through this, you'd take a pretty large screw. This guy here is not going to make it through a 2x4. So you just have different, different situations that require different screws. Those are probably the ones I used on this raised bed garden situation. I don't know. I think that's probably all I want to say about it, except if you teach your kids how to do this, they're great at drilling holes and they love doing it. There is one thing you're going to have to do, though. I cannot tell you how many drill bits I've not only had broken but watched people break because they don't get the concept of drilling a hole. The thing is, you drill straight in, and then when you take that drill out, you pull straight out. Now what people will do that are just learning is while they're taking it out, they will pull the back end of the drill up before the bit is already out, and you'll break the bit every time. And I cannot tell you how many times I've watched that happen. And people will swear up and down, I am bringing it straight out, but they don't realize they aren't bringing it all the way out. So you have to teach people how to do it. But if you had it, like you wanted to make this raised bed garden a family project, which would be a great family project, little jobs like drilling pilot holes would be great for people who are not particularly capable of doing lots of other things. I mean, hey, let's face it, we all like to be part of things, and we all like to feel like we're contributing to something, and you're doing your kids a big favor if you incorporate them in the things you do. Later on I'll come back and be the smartest thing you ever did. But anyway, that's kind of the pilot hole discussion. I hope I got everything. If I didn't, I'll come back out and film something else later.